You're listening to Existential Coffee.
Okay, so my question is, what does existential mean to you?
When I think of the word existential, I think of, beyond existence. Obviously something that it's hard to explain, you can't define. It's sort of one of those way out there, you can't really understand it. I don't know, that's what I think of. Beyond existence.
I'm here, therefore I am. Okay?
To leave my mark on the world, my imprint somehow.
Existential means thinking about the world and why we exist and why life exists.
And what is the significance of that to you?
I don't know yet.
Beyond reality is basically what I think it is. Something that's beyond our everyday life, beyond what we usually think about.
I'd say being in the world and how humans make sense of why they're in the world or how they're in the world. I personally believe, kind of a nihilist, that life has no meaning, that we're on this earth and we are not allowed to know why.
I think it's different for everyone. It's your view of the world, okay? And how you see the world. And some people see the glass half empty, and some people see the glass half full. It's kind of your take on the world.
Right.
Yeah. There's a time I think I knew what that meant, and right now I'm drawing a blank. More love and less hate, but what does it mean? That's one of the greatest mysteries in life, isn't it?
Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Existential Coffee. We're recording in front of a live studio audience in downtown Chicago on this beautiful summer day, Friday, August 8th, 2014. I'll be your host today. Dr. Jason LaHood is my name, licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Illinois. I'm also the clinical director of Sankofa Psychological Services, a private clinic located downtown Chicago. Joining me today is my co-host, Dr. Julia Burrell-Smith.
Hi, everybody.
Julia, as always, is board certified in all things important in life. Also postdoctoral fellow, director of training here at Sankofa. And I'd like to have a round of applause because she just found out yesterday she passed the EPPP.
Yeah, allegedly.
So the EPPP is the board exam for clinical psychologists, and she will soon be licensed.
Ooh.
All right, congrats.
Thank you.
So today's topic is how to survive in a world when you don't have kids. We have two fantastic and thoughtful guests today. First, incredible blogger and scholar on life. Laura creates the blog What the Lala at www.whatthelala.com.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you, Jason.
Yes. So I've been keeping up with your posts since I was introduced to What the Lala. I really think it's quite authentic. It's very special in the way that you have a conversation with your audience. It's one of the reasons why I was excited to have you here today. One of the blogs that actually spawned this idea was the blog you wrote, How to Survive in Society When You Don't Want Kids, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how did you choose that idea, or how did you come to that idea?
My blog focuses mostly on kind of things that we all deal with on a life-to-life basis, and for the most part that I think are interesting, and hopefully everyone else does too. And I was taking a class, a story studio out in Chicago, and one of the writing assignments was to write a how-to in the second person. So thinking about what's something that I could kind of take and write on a unique angle that a lot of people might be struggling with, but no one talks about as much, and that is what to do when you don't want children. It's something that when I say out loud to everyone, I get a lot of pushback. Mm-hmm. So I decided to write a piece on that, and it was one of the most popular pieces. I think that even people who do want children or maybe can't have children or already have children, they all could appreciate that question at some point in your life, because it's such a big issue is, do I want kids? How does that change my life, or how would it affect my life to not have children when that's something society's so dependent on?
Mm-hmm. And actually, we posted that blog on our website, and then we always post on Twitter and Facebook had 33,000 hits on that. So I think you're right that it's a topic that I think provokes a lot of people, and they're interested in hearing other people's perspectives.
Definitely.
One interesting thing is you have a link on your blog, cast of characters.
Yes.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. Well, you call your boyfriend, your partner, Mr. Medium.
Yes.
Where does that come from?
Actually, he made a joke. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with the show Sex and the City, and Mr. Big on Sex and the City, and his whole thing was, oh, you're trying to be like Carrie. I'm definitely not Mr. Big. I should be Mr. Medium. And he was joking, but I'm definitely not above taking that cliche reference, and decided to call him Mr. M. Everyone has nicknames so that they aren't, Google search is a dangerous thing these days. So.
Sure. Okay, thank you. And our next guest is Darian Halligan. He's a senior executive at Health Data Specialists. Darian's just actually a guy we pulled off the street this morning. We tied him up and said, you're going to come and converse with us or else.
Right, hence why I'm like profusely sweating right now, so thank you for that.
But in all seriousness, Darian is a longtime friend, fellow existentialist. When we had a space available here, I really wanted to have you here and hear, you be a part of the conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. You also have a really cool bike. Do you want to just talk really quickly about that or no?
Yeah, I mean, it's, when I moved here to Chicago, I decided to give up my car because I wanted to try it for a year. And I found this great shop that imported bikes from Copenhagen. And it was kind of like my daily rider. So I plopped down $2,000, and that became my daily rider. It still is my daily rider.
Did you ride it today?
I did not.
So, and finally, our correspondent on the street, Jessica Garcia. Jessica is a therapy extern here at the practice, just incredible and intuitive clinician. She's going to be joining us today and giving us her opinions or wisdom from the perspective of the LGBTQ community.
Speaking for all of them.
Yeah, everyone.
As always.
As always. So I want to welcome all of you and welcome to our audience. As always, we reserve the right to pull someone from the audience and put them on the spot. So let's get started.
Okay, so our topic today, as Jason mentioned, is how to survive in a society or a world when you don't have kids. So we want this to be as inclusive as possible. So this includes people who maybe don't want to have children, maybe want to have children but can't have children or are struggling to have children, maybe people who are a bit on the fence or ambivalent about whether or not they want kids, and as always, people who have children and maybe at times would prefer that they did not have them.
Don't want
So we're going to be talking about that today. So yeah, let's get into it.
So, Laura, when you were writing your blog, you took almost like a very kind of autobiographical approach, which I think is one of the things that draws people in. And it seems like you have been informed from a very early age about your decision to not have kids.
Yes. So in the blog I wrote, I had a terrible babysitting adventure like most of us do when we're younger and babysitting. I was probably about 12 years old, and this little boy that I was babysitting ended up waking up from his nap, which I didn't notice, and he got into his mother's red Chanel lipstick while also trying to change his own diaper. So there was just diaper excrements everywhere along with this lipstick, and I couldn't get it out. And it was humiliating and disgusting. So I came home and told my mom that I never wanted to have children. And of course, she thought it was just from that incident, which was what spurred it. But I kind of had that thought then, I guess, since that time. I just turned 30, so that was about 18 years ago, that I've decided I just don't think I want children.
Mm-hmm.
So.
That's that sort of popular saying that an experience like that is kind of like birth control, right?
Oh,
like
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it was awful.
So, Darian, how about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so my thoughts on this have really changed a lot over the last 6 months. My mother just became a widow, and I've always thought that blood is always thicker than water. And, my interaction with my mom over the last 6 months have really made me think about this topic a lot. And, here in Chicago, it's very easy to become narcissistic because we kind of have everything at our fingertips. We can order food whenever we want. We don't have to be dependent on other people. We really have everything we absolutely need at our fingertips. But what my mom made me realize is, especially now as she's really truly alone, I mean, she is alone for the first time in 45 years. And that is that her friends, friends will only go so far. Friends always have their own priorities, and those own priorities are always going to be different and greater than your own. And sometimes it's just difficult to comprehend that, as we think, well, family is, our friends is our family. But I find, and I'm finding as I get older, that those friends, they just go to a point, and it's always family that kind of picks up where the friends leave off. And so my mom, has kept saying to me, who's going to take care of you when you're old? And she kept saying to me, if I didn't have you, I don't know what I would do. You did so much, and I could never count on my best friends to do as much. So I've had a lot of chance to think about this topic, and it's kind of apropos that you've asked me to be on it. I personally want to have children. It's been more difficult to do that since I've been here in Chicago for 6 years because, I think about my lifestyle and how my lifestyle would change.
So it sounds for you, it's similar to Laura, and I imagine similar to all of us, that event informed your decision. Were you thinking you wanted kids before your father's passing?
Yeah, I do. And the other part of this is that, when I talk to a lot of my friends who don't want to have kids, who want to have kids, and I'm always asking them why, because it is such a hot topic. And what I find is that there's two sets of parents. There's the parents that believe that the children are the most important things in the world. And then there are the parents that believe the relationship between the mother and the father is the most important relationship. And I find more of the first than the latter. I personally believe that the relationship between the mother and the father is the most important relationship and should be for a lot of reasons.
Are these your friends that have kids or that don't have kids?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
Because I think that that's an interesting thing that people think about before they have children.
Right.
That the marital or the spousal relationship is the most important one. And then I think they have kids, and at least for a while, sometimes that relationship takes a back seat to these little human beings who need a lot of attention.
Well, I find that, a lot of my friends have had children who have been in tumultuous relationships, and they sort of feel that the child is going to help fix things.
Nothing makes things better than a baby, right?
Right, exactly. And I think in a short period of time, that becomes the case, where your attention now focuses on something else that you love. But to me, having children is not about reliving my past or fixing past mistakes, although I've made a lot of them, but they make me who I am today. For me, it's about when you love somebody so much that the only thing that you want to do, the thing that you can do most together is to create another in your own likeness. It becomes more about love and what your family can do together rather than, fixing something, or rather than thinking about, my life as an individual versus the life as the family.
Well, that's a good spin on the idea of joy and like emerging from what you were describing with your dad's passing. Ernest Becker, he's sort of a philosopher / psychologist, wrote a book in the 70s called The Denial of Death. And he talks about, we're not putting a value on that, but he talks about what do we do to ward off mortality, to push mortality away, the idea that we are unto death. We can't escape this, especially on Existential Coffee, because,
we always have to talk about death.
We always have to talk about
Existential
death.
Coffee.
is having kids one way of transcending the suffering around our mortality or around those events? Ironically, he got the Pulitzer Prize like 3 months after he died, which, shows it's almost as if it proves his illustration that he wrote the book. And
I think it sets nicely with what your mom said, which was, who's going to take care of you?
Right. Well, legacy is such a fascinating topic, and my father was an extremely strong individual, and he very much wanted to leave a legacy. And at first, when he started talking about it, I thought that was very selfish of him. But as I got to be thinking about, well, why is that bad to want to leave a part of you here that sustains past your death? I do believe that there is something to that. That there is something about leaving a piece of ourselves in somebody else, and not in a John Malkovich way, but more of a just who we want to be in our teachings and how we want to be perceived in life outside of when we die.
Being Darian,
right?
Being Darian
right.
Elliot. My dad will call and he'll ask, how are the grand dogs? We have 2 dogs, and he calls them like his grandkids, but grand dogs. And it started out kind of being annoying, but now it's sort of really nice, because I think it's his way of processing the fact that, my wife and I do not have kids. So, Laura, what do you do with like the societal pressures? I imagine you're confronted with, I imagine people may see you as obstinate or selfish or whatever, the microaggressions, as we would call them, walking around day to day.
First of all, my mom does the same thing with my dog. Her grand dog, so I think that's hilarious. But I actually like it. She sends me presents from him, like, for Mother's Day, things like that. So it's nice. But as far as, society's reaction, I was actually most worried when I posted the piece, what my boyfriend's parents would think, as well as my own family, and my grandparents are still living on my mother's side, them as well. And the main reaction seemed to be, my grandmother thought I was in denial, which is nice. My mom just thought it was funny and like, oh, okay, you don't really mean it. And then my boyfriend's parents seemed to be a little bit worried. Maybe they weren't quite sure. They want grandchildren, obviously. So I think as far as society itself, I'm not too concerned with people's reactions. Thinking that I'm selfish is part of the reason that I am a little selfish. That's part of the reason I don't want kids. I really like my life. I don't know. I can barely take care of my dog. I don't know if I have what it takes to take care of myself and another living person. And something else my blog touches on is that I've struggled with depression for my entire life. And throughout that, I've really tried to wonder why I would bring someone into a world that, I don't know, seems really scary to me sometimes. And that's a big part of it, along with just that a selfish side, I guess. So it's kind of those two aspects that I don't really feel like explaining to strangers in the street or, my customers. But family deserves to know that. And I think that because they love me, they might be disappointed, but they understand.
Yeah. Well, I'm informed in the same way. I mean, my mom was batshit crazy, and is that that's the medical?
It's the
term?
clinical
That's
term.
Clinical.
Yeah.
The DSM will have to check. And I think she was constantly saying, I never wanted kids. So that narrative, I think, has followed me, and it's the reason why I think sometimes I'm on the fence about whether I want to have kids or not. The idea of adoption, which we're going to talk about later, comes up for me a lot. Like, is that a better decision or choice? So Jessica, what are your thoughts?
Well, as somebody who I've identified as gay probably since like 2nd grade without realizing it. But I didn't come out until I was 22 or 23. And I think for me, I grew up in like a suburban area with not a whole lot of exposure to gay people at all. I didn't even know like what a gay person was until I was like 9 or 10. And I think growing up like that, being closeted, and being terrified, I never thought that I would be able to have kids. You always kind of think of like the gay uncle or the gay aunt who just kind of is by themselves and maybe lives with a roommate and nobody talks about it, and they just never have kids and they just
Uncle
grow up.
or Aunt Jessica's friend.
Yeah,
Air
yeah,
quotes.
and that's just kind of
Roommate.
like what it is.
Roommate.
I think for a long
Special
time,
friend.
until very recently, the past like 10, 15 years, you didn't really see gay people having kids a whole lot. That was kind of just like the expectation, like, oh, if you're gay, you're just not going to have kids. So I think for me that was always a really scary thought, because I've always loved kids and I've always just wanted to have kids from the time I was a child. So I think for me, the fact that there has been like a huge change in the climate of gay parenting in the past 10, 15 years, so much, it's very, very exciting for a lot of gay people. But it's also changed a lot, because now a lot of people in the gay community feel as though now you have the opportunity to do it. So like, why wouldn't you do it? So I think that there's a lot of
So it's become
something that
it reflects what straight people deal with.
Yeah, I think that there's a really big changing climate, and obviously it's not completely true. I think it's still very acceptable for gay people to make the choice not to have children. But I think that there has been more pressure now. It's like you can do it, so you kind of have this responsibility to do it, especially for women. I think that for lesbians in particular, it's really interesting because you have society. I'm really talking about like urban and suburban areas where this is something that is seen as much more accepted. In a lot of areas, it's still not accepted at all. So I think that with society, you have pressures on women that, you have these maternal instincts, you should have a child, but you're part of a gay partnership, so maybe you shouldn't have kids as well. So I think there's a lot of different layers that go into it that are really interesting, that have kind of sprouted with the kind of birth of, gay marriage being a thing and gay parenting being more accepted.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you talk about the pressures on women, because, as I was listening to, I was thinking about Laura's perspective and Laura's blog and sort of this increase in people talking about this decision to not have children, or a decision to actively not have kids or not want to have kids. And I know we talked about this a little bit in the last blog, that I have some male friends and male clients who have a child sort of unexpectedly out of wedlock and who are very adamant about not wanting any more children. Maybe they want to get married again, but they don't want to have any more kids. And I'm just wondering, do you think that this is different for men than it is for women?
I think so. I think that there's a lot more pressure or surprise from, society, the families, friends, whatnot, if a woman says she doesn't want to have children as opposed to a man. But maybe that's just my perception as a woman. People seem to be more taken back than if my brother were to say that, it wouldn't be as big of a deal.
Do you think part of that is about both men and women play an active role in having children, but do you think that has something to do with the much more active role that women have? There are probably men walking out there in the world who have children and don't know it. There isn't a single woman that has a biological child and doesn't know about it.
There is a TV show about that, though.
Was she in a coma during her pregnancy?
Watch the TV show. It's pretty incredible. Yeah, I'm serious.
I definitely think so. And that's just been over time, and things are definitely changing, but where the woman was the homemaker and the one to take care of the children, and really that was her primary role, was to be a stay-at-home mom. But as society's changing, and there's lesbian couples and gay couples and couples that don't want to have children, or divorces, and people staying single and on Tinder when they're 60 years old. Things are changing, but I definitely think that there's still that idea in the back of everyone's head that the woman is the one who is responsible for that child and should have an interest in it.
And I think that there are a lot more women having children without partners. Certainly the most unmarried women having children are over the age of 30. We don't know if those people are just not married, but in partnerships. But I think that there are women who actively say, okay, I'm 35, I'm 38, I'm 40, I'm 42, I don't have anybody in my life and I want to have a child, and they decide to do that on their own.
I just think that people should be able to choose either way, and there's judgment on a woman having a child by herself as much as there is on a woman who doesn't want to have children.
It seems to transcend orientation, context. It almost feels like there's a subtle regret whether you have kids or not. I always talk about this line from a movie that I really like about some people having the courage to live and some people having the courage to die. And it's almost like having the courage to accept what type of regret you may end up having kids or not having kids, and dealing with the pressures of that, because who knows what you're going to think 20 years from now, 30 years from now. And then the idea, my brother has, so I have 2 nephews and a niece. My brother has 3 kids, and as the 3rd child came into the world, the grand dog thing started. I think there was some acceptance on his part about, it doesn't matter anymore whether, I felt the pressure relieved in terms of that.
Laura, maybe for people who are not quite as familiar with this, I think there have been a lot of writings, your blogs and other people writing about this decision to not want to have kids. Could you talk just a little bit for our listeners about maybe some of your personal reasons or some of what you've read about people's decision not to have kids, and then the responses that you get from people, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So it's kind of migrated throughout my life. Obviously starting when I was younger and I just couldn't deal with babysitting these kids. I was 12, I was with myself, so that makes sense. And then as I kind of got older, I think part of it was being in relationships, somewhat tumultuous, college, right after college. It makes sense that I would be opposed to having children if I'm with someone that it's just not a right fit. At least that's good. I was self-aware enough for that. And then it kind of continued into just being really wary of the world and not really sure if I would want to bring children into the world that I kind of struggle with myself every day. So is that really something I want to do? And then now as I'm older, just that I really don't know if I could take care of these children, if that's something that I would enjoy doing every day, and I don't want to be that parent. I have friends who have those parents, and I see the negative effects that it's had on them and how hard life has been, and I would hate to be the reason for someone's future unhappiness. So I think that for the most part, everyone just keeps telling me that when I'm older, I will want kids. When you're older. And now I am older, and they still kind of keep saying that, or, oh, you'd be such a good mom. You're so great with, little Andy or whatever his name is. You'd be so good with your own kids. And I like kids. That's not the issue. They're funny. They're hilarious. I volunteer with children, but I'm not taking care of them every day. And seeing, being responsible for them. It's a lot. And I suppose that leads in with the selfishness a little bit, but I'm fine with that. I think that's a great reason to not have kids, and probably a really responsible decision for myself right now.
Laura, I think you said it very elegant, but I would say that the amount of pressure that you're putting on yourself is enormous. And I would say that, release that. Just let that go. I mean, it was just
let it go. Stop
when I listened to you and how you were speaking about, I was just amazed at just the amount of personal pressure that you put on yourself. And I'm just wondering, do you do that with everything?
Oh yes, I'm very type A personality, and that is actually a great example of a response I would receive from someone. Like, every parent feels pressure. You're putting too much pressure on yourself, but that's just who I am, and I would love to learn to not put pressure on myself, and that's something I work on. And the blog is part of the reason I started that. And maybe it will, in the next 5 years, and then I will decide that I want children. If I could even have children, I really, I don't know. So there's that issue as well. But that's really funny that you say that, because that's definitely a response that I get quite a bit as well.
I think that there should be more people like Laura out there, honestly, because I think that having a child is such a huge decision, and I think that somebody who is making that decision should be putting a lot of pressure on themselves, because that is a commitment that you have for life. And I think that there are so many women out there who just kind of cave into the pressure of, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to give my mom their grandchild. I want to ensure that I have somebody there to take care of me when I'm older without thinking about the day-to-day. And I think that a lot of women just do that and then just have a kid kind of as like an accessory and don't take it as seriously as some people should. And that's when you see people who are so unhappy when they're older and don't have good coping skills and have all of these problems. And I think that there should be more people out there who really think long and hard of, like, would I be a good parent? Is this something that I actually really want to do?
It's almost like you're saying, like, you have to not want kids to then, responsibly have kids?
No, I just think that it should be more of a decision based on yourself than on what everybody else is expecting of you, and just based on the fact that, like, oh, I really want to leave a legacy and this is what I should be doing. I think that you really need to be thinking about the selflessness of, can I take care of this child in a way that I would want to be taken care of? And I think that there should be a lot that really goes into it. And I think there are so many examples of bad parents out there that probably shouldn't have kids and probably know that they shouldn't have kids.
Well, I was going to say that there are a lot of people who have children who don't necessarily make that decision. One could argue that you always make that decision, because there's always, in most places, there's always an opportunity to terminate a pregnancy. But I think, we're talking about, by and large, we're talking about people who are making decisions to actively choose to try to have children, or to actively try to not have children. Going off of what Jessica was saying about wishing there were more people like Laura, I think there are a lot of people like Laura, and they don't talk about it, because I think that there is an expectation for people to have children, particularly married people. And I also think that there's a bit of a shift there, that the people who should be justifying why they want to have kids are the people who want to have kids, not the people who don't want to have kids. That there are, not to get too global intellectual, but there's a lot of ethical and global issues about overpopulation, what
carbon footprint.
Yeah, our carbon footprint, what we're doing to our world with all of these people and all of the resources that they're using, particularly in a first world, highly economically advantaged country like the United States.
So there's enough people having kids.
One could make that argument.
That the pendulum is maybe shifting toward a more acceptable, less societal pressures around not having kids.
One could make the argument that there are enough children out there without homes that nobody should be having children.
Which brings up adoption. That's a good segue into adoption.
Jason really wants to talk about adoption. Let's talk about it. What do you want to say about it?
What do you want to talk about, Jason?
No, let's talk about adoption.
I'll kick that off. I have a very good friend of mine that I've been talking a lot about this, and she has always said that, I don't want to have kids, and so we keep talking about it. And then recently she said, well, maybe I would be open to adoption because I don't want to deal with the first 2 years of kids.
She wants to adopt a 2-year-old.
She would want to. She wants to miss some of the diaper and lipstick things that go on that Laura mentioned.
As a psychologist, I would think that would be a horrible idea, but I understand where she's coming from.
That was her perspective, so that was just saying that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of important things that happen between mother and child, or parent and child, in the first 2 years of life, but.
You're speaking developmentally.
I'm speaking developmentally from an attachment perspective.
Mm-hmm. My therapist, actually, one of her specializations is working with people who are having difficulty getting pregnant, or around infertility problems, and then struggling with the loss and the mourning of that, and then the decision around adoption. Her name's Dr. Elaine Culp, by the way. She's up in Lincolnwood. If anybody wants to call her, she's amazing. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think one of the points that she makes, because I've had several discussions with her about my wife and I and our conversations around, having kids or adopting or what we want to do, there's this notion of the pain and suffering around not being able to have your own child. Then there's people who are conflicted or don't want to have kids because they're informed by a past where, like Laura was saying, where I don't know if I want to bring somebody into this world to deal with these same things that I'm dealing with. And that's kind of where I'm coming from as well, where the struggle is. And she pointed out to me that, and it was pretty profound at the moment, that I would never, ever do the things that my mom did to me, to my kids. And I hadn't ever really thought about it that way, that the joyful moments will be really incredible, and there will be difficult moments. And as I was thinking about it, it's almost as if it doesn't matter whether you have kids or not. It's about the meaning that's created around it, because either way, I imagine there's going to be difficulties in life and struggles and issues with confidence. I mean, nobody's ever been a parent before. You parent how you're parented, all of those things.
Yeah. Speaking on your the piece about the difficulty or the mourning of not being able to have a child that is genetically yours, right? Some people feel very, very strongly about this and go to great lengths and have lots of invasive medical procedures in order to have children that are biologically their own. And I think that there's a lot of things that sort of play into that. And just from an anecdotal perspective, it seems to me that the people who struggle more with that are men rather than women. Men who have a harder time, or at least just conceptually, feel much more strongly about wanting to have a child that is biologically theirs rather than adopting a child.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's because of the legacy issue, like Darren mentioned, with his father wanting to leave a legacy, that they see that the best way to do that is within their children?
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think that's very possible. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know what Ernest Becker was saying is that we all do this, whether it's with kids or driving a Ferrari down Michigan Avenue or whatever. We all want to confront our mortality and then deal with the stress that comes along with that. You had mentioned depression, that was one of the reasons for maybe not wanting to have kids. How do you confront that? Like, what would be? How do you do it personally?
How do I confront my depression, or in the fact of
with kids
leading to not wanting? Yeah,
correct.
I mean, it's really hard because I think that everyone has to. I mean, me personally, depression runs in my family, so is that something I would pass on to my child? And at the same time, I don't regret any of my last 30 years. I think that my depression has also made me who I am and also brought out some of the best parts of myself. So, that could be it's definitely not a gift to give someone genetic depression, but, I've made a really good life for myself with it. And so I think that I would hope if I were to have children, they would be strong enough and maybe I could actually help them through that. But I think most of it is that on days that I feel like I'm struggling to even take care of myself, how could I really take care of a child or a teenager who's really needing guidance? Because for me, it's a very selfish disease, and it kind of affects me in that way, to where I become very tunnel visioned on myself. And that's never a good thing when you have children, in my opinion.
Well, so Jessica, for you, when we're talking about having kids, what would that conversation be like for you in terms of like what your options would be?
For me personally, or just like gay people in general?
You're speaking for all gay people.
When you speak about you personally, it's for all gay people.
Oh God, so much pressure. Well, for me personally, I definitely want to carry my own kids. But I think for gay people in general, it's just a whole lot more planning. It's kind of like for a heterosexual person who is having a lot of fertility problems. You have options like adoption, and then you have fertility treatments. Then you have the whole concept of women can swap eggs. You have like different types of artificial insemination. You have in vitro if it doesn't work, and it can be like $100,000 which is insane, I think, but it is what it is.
In terms of wanting your own kids from a genetic base or adopting, or
Uh-huh.
what the options are, because like you said, it's more complex. I think now, and correct me if I'm wrong, gay men now, they do the swirl where they both, and it's just
with
like
a surrogate or
with a
with
surrogate. Mhm.
So they don't know
You don't know which dad it is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's something that's kind of really cool about getting pregnant for people who are gay, is that there really is no like gold standard. You really have like so many options that you can choose from. But for me, I don't know, I'm kind of traditional. While I identify as gay, I kind of want to live a traditional lifestyle. I want to have kids. I want my partner to also carry their own kids.
White picket fence?
What?
Do you want a white picket fence?
I don't know. I don't think that
in
would
New,
really...
in New Jersey.
I don't know.
Seaside?
Not Seaside. But anyway, yeah, for me, I don't know. It's just kind of, we talk about it being like this big decision, but for somebody who's always kind of wanted to have kids and feels comfortable with the decision, it's not really, I'm not thinking about it too much. Like for me, it's just like, I want to have kids, I want to get the treatments, and that's just kind of it. If I have problems, then maybe I would go to adoption, but
Mm-hmm.
I definitely want to carry my own kids.
Well, and to Laura's point, I feel the same way that you do in terms of, because I've struggled with depression as well, and what would be the ramifications of that. And for me, that's why adoption keeps coming. I bring up adoption. Can I bring it up again, Julia? Is that okay? All right.
Absolutely.
But the idea of adoption, I think, offers a more reparative, like I didn't bring this child into the world, but if I adopt, there can be like a reparative experience, and I guess I don't perceive the same thing when I think of having kids biologically.
Just to play devil's advocate.
Sure.
So you would be bringing somebody into the world who would have their own genetics. They just wouldn't be related to yours. And you would know nothing about those genes, potentially. So if we're going solely from a nature, like taking nurture out of the perspective, right?
Mhm.
So then you have all of these genetic and environmental interactions that you don't know anything about.
By adopting?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He's like, and so what?
Yeah.
No,
I
hear.
don't perceive it as.
I hear what you're saying, that it would be a reparative experience for you because you would be parenting somebody who wouldn't necessarily have the same genetic.
I think it
issues.
goes back the responsibility and service. Like I'm a psychologist, so I want to be in the life of service. And will that take away from my ability to do that as well? I mean, I work with a lot of kids. So.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about genes. It's about giving somebody a life or an option to be able to fulfill their potential, whatever that potential may be.
I just want to be clear. I think adoption is great. I was just playing devil's advocate to Jason's point about the genetics versus the non-genetics. And I think you're right. I don't think it's always about genes. And in fact, I think sometimes it's not at all about genes. But I think there is something, for a lot of people, there is something very important and maybe comforting about knowing that that child is like a piece of them or has a part of them, and that sort of overrides the, at least in the planning stages, that overrides the experience of having a child, regardless of how that child came into their lives.
Mm-hmm. It seems like through our exploration today, the thing that's emerged, the idea of how all of us are dealing with, we mentioned mortality, but the derivative of that, which is that there's possible loss or there's possible damage to different types of relationships, or the possibility of joy or the fear of no joy, all of those things that we're all dealing with them, but within our own context, and then even a larger context of like society and what society values. That incongruence can be stressful, and there's different ways of dealing with it.
I think we're at the wrapping up stage. Do either of our guests want to say any parting words before we say goodbye?
I guess just real quickly, Jason mentioned choosing, kind of living with regret on either choice.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite comments I got on my post of how to survive society when you don't want children was from my friend who was 7 months pregnant at the time, and her due date is in about 2 days. She wrote, "Great post. It was my favorite. I'm still deciding if I want children or not."
Wow, that's awesome.
And she was 7 months
So
pregnant.
great.
And I just was dying, and I thought, I think that speaks to your point really well. Like, sometimes you just don't know. Some people know more than others, but there's always that chance of regret no matter what you do. So I just wanted to circle back around to that.
That's a great comment
Yeah.
that she made. It's
Yeah.
like it's like meeting yourself where you're at and whatever your experience is, and I feel like that gets you as close to as possible to the ultimate question, which again is a derivative of like, do I want kids? Don't I want kids? And the struggle with maybe not being able to have them. Darian, any final comments?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for having me on.
Well, it's time to wrap things up. I want to thank our wonderful guests today, Laura Zorner and Darian Halligan, and as always, our lovely correspondent on the street, Jessica Garcia. Special thanks to our executive producer and intern extraordinaire, Madison Hurd, our associate producer, sound mixer, post-production editor, and all-around great guy, John Brand. Thanks to our live studio audience and all of our conversationalists and listeners. You guys participate as much as we do, and we appreciate you listening.
So my little wrap up, do not forget, know your insurance policy. It's so important. We're going to say it at the end of every podcast. Know what your plan is so that you can be prepared. So thanks for stopping by. For Julia and the rest of the crew, I'm Jason LaHood. Thanks for listening to Existential Coffee. Go grab one. Bye.